After 15 years of humiliation, Arthur Sterling returns to the reading of his ex-wife's $185 million will. The biggest surprise: the scorned father inherits everything, while the arrogant son receives only 25. And a shocking confession. What sacrifice is behind this tragedy? And is it altruism or revenge? If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The sound of rain against my apartment window had become my meditation. For the past 15 years, it had been the only constant in my life, a steady rhythm that asked nothing of me, judged nothing about me, expected nothing from me. I sat at my small desk in the corner of my one-bedroom apartment in East Portland, Oregon, the glow of my laptop screen reflecting off my reading glasses. Friday afternoon meant I had 3 tax returns to finish before the weekend. Mr. Sato from the cafe downstairs, the Rodriguezes who ran the deli, young Felix, the delivery driver who was putting himself through college, small accounts, simple work, honest work. My hands moved across the keyboard with the same precision they'd once used to manage billion-dollar portfolios. Muscle memory doesn't forget, even when everything else does. The apartment was quiet except for the rain and the occasional creak of the old radiator. No television, no music. I'd learned to appreciate silence over the years. It was honest. At least it didn't pretend to be something it wasn't. My phone buzzed on the desk. An unknown Chicago number. I almost didn't answer. I got enough spam calls, but something made me reach for it. "Is this Arthur Sterling?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped speaking. "Mr. Sterling, this is Dr. Evelyn Shaw from Whitaker and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Ilara Sterling." My hand stopped moving on the keyboard. Ilara? I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years, hadn't allowed myself to think it. "I see," I managed. "I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Sterling passed away on Tuesday. The funeral is tomorrow at 2:00 at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. Following the service, there will be a reading of the will at our offices at 4:00. Your presence is requested." The words seemed to come from very far away. Ilara was dead. The woman I'd loved more than my own life. The woman I'd destroyed my career for. The woman who'd never spoken to me again. "Mr. Sterling, are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. Will you be able to attend?" Every instinct told me to decline. What business did I have at Ilara's funeral? I was the disgraced ex-husband, the criminal who'd stolen from his own company. I'd seen the articles at the time. CFO Arthur Sterling charged with embezzlement. They'd used my worst photo, the one where I looked guilty, even though I wasn't. But something in me, some stubborn remnant of who I'd once been, whispered that I should go, that I owed Ilara that much. At least. "I'll be there," I heard myself say, the word echoing with a sudden, sharp anger at the circumstances that had led to this inevitable, tragic end. After I hung up, I sat very still, watching the rain run down the window in irregular streams. Chicago. I hadn't been back to Chicago in 15 years, hadn't seen Liam, my son, in almost as long. The last time had been in a courtroom, his face white with shame as the judge read my sentence. He'd been 30 then, just starting to make a name for himself in the finance world. Now he'd be 45, a stranger. I closed my laptop and walked to the small closet where I kept my one good suit, charcoal gray, slightly outdated, but well-maintained. I'd worn it to job interviews that never led anywhere, to meetings with probation officers, to the small accounting firm where I'd eventually found work doing taxes for people who paid in cash and didn't ask questions about my past. I held up the suit, checking for moths or stains. It would do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen Ilara. It had been in her hospital room 3 months after my sentencing. She'd been recovering from the stress-induced heart attack that had nearly killed her. Liam had been there, too. standing guard like a sentinel. "You need to leave," Liam had said, his voice cold. "You've done enough damage." Ilara had turned her face away, wouldn't look at me. That silence had hurt more than any words could have. I'd left. I'd taken a bus to Portland, as far from Chicago as I could get. I'd started over with nothing, no reputation, no connections, no references, just a 65-year-old man with a criminal record trying to remember how to be human again. The next morning, I caught the early flight to Chicago. 6 hours of watching clouds and trying not to think. The woman next to me tried to make small talk, something about visiting grandchildren, but I must have given off an aura of unavailability because she eventually stopped trying. Chicago looked different. Bigger, shinier, more towers crowding the skyline. The cab driver who picked me up at O'Hare chatted about the Bears and the housing market. I nodded in the right places but wasn't really listening. I'd booked a room at a small hotel near the cemetery. Nothing fancy, just a place to change clothes and collect myself before the funeral. At 1:30, I put on my charcoal suit, knotted my tie with hands that only shook slightly, and took another cab to Graceland Cemetery. The rain had followed me from Portland, a fine mist that made everything look gray and indistinct. There were more cars than I'd expected. Ilara had built Ether Capital from a small startup into one of America's most successful hedge funds. Of course, people would come. Board members, employees, business partners, politicians probably. I stayed at the back behind a large oak tree, watching from a distance. I could see the crowd gathered under a green canopy. Liam stood at the front, his hair shorter than I remembered, wearing a black suit and looking every inch the senior partner he'd become. He was flanked by 2 women in expensive suits, probably executives from the company. The service was brief. A minister said words about legacy and contribution. Someone from the company spoke about Ilara's vision and leadership. Liam stood perfectly still through all of it, his face composed, professional. My son had learned to wear masks well. I didn't approach. Didn't let myself be seen. When the service ended and people began filing back to their cars, I walked in the opposite direction, hands in my pockets, collar turned up against the mist, feeling a deep, suffocating anger that I couldn't even mourn my wife openly. The law offices of Whitaker and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. I arrived early, habit from my old life, and waited in the lobby, watching well-dressed people hurry past with briefcases and phones pressed to their ears. At 3:50, I took the elevator to the 28th floor. The receptionist looked up when I approached. "Name, please." "Arthur Sterling." Something flickered in her expression. Recognition, distaste. She recovered quickly. "Conference room C, down the hall, 3rd door on the right." The conference room was all glass and chrome with a view that stretched across downtown Chicago to the lake beyond. A long mahogany table dominated the center, surrounded by leather chairs. Several people were already seated, faces I half recognized from Ilara's business world. They stopped talking when I entered. I took a seat near the door, away from the main group. The chair was uncomfortable, or maybe that was just me. I folded my hands on the table and waited. Liam arrived exactly at 4:00. He moved with the same purposeful stride Ilara had once had. All business, all control. He walked directly to the head of the table, the seat that had probably been his mother's during board meetings, and sat down without looking around. Then he saw me. For just a moment, his composure cracked, his eyes widened slightly, and color drained from his face. Then the mask came back harder than before. "What are you doing here?" His voice carried across the room, sharp enough to cut. "I was invited," I said quietly, "by Dr. Shaw. This is family business. You gave up that right when you stole from Mom's company." Several people shifted uncomfortably. I kept my hands steady on the table, my voice calm. I'm here because I was asked to be here. Liam's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the door opened and Dr. Evelyn Shaw entered. She was younger than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe mid-40s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and glasses perched on her nose. She carried a leather portfolio and moved with quiet authority. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Evelyn Shaw, senior partner at Whitaker and Associates, and I had the honor of being Mrs. Sterling's estate attorney for the past 15 years. She took a seat at the table, positioning herself between Liam and me. "I know this is a difficult time, so I'll try to be as efficient as possible." She opened her portfolio and withdrew a thick document bound in dark blue covers. The last will and testament of Alara Elizabeth Sterling, executed on March 15th, 2024. Liam sat back in his chair, his expression settling into something between satisfaction and entitlement. I recognized that look. It was the same one he'd worn when he'd closed his first major deal, pride mixed with certainty that the world would arrange itself as it should. "Before we begin with the specific bequests," Dr. Shaw continued, "I want to read Mrs. Sterling's opening statement. She was quite insistent that this be read aloud in full before anything else." She adjusted her glasses and began to read in a clear, professional voice. "To those gathered here, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and it's time for certain truths to be told. I have lived my life with many regrets, but perhaps none greater than my silence. I built a company, created jobs, made money. These things seemed important at the time, but I also destroyed a good man's life to protect my business, and I let my son grow up believing lies because the truth was inconvenient. This will is my attempt, inadequate as it may be, to finally set the record straight." The room had gone very quiet. Liam's expression had shifted from confident to confused. Dr. Shaw continued reading. "Arthur Sterling did not embezzle money from Ether Capital. I know this because I did." The words hung in the air like smoke. Someone gasped. Liam's face had gone white. In 2009, Dr. Shaw read, "Our company was on the verge of collapse. We'd overextended on 3 major projects, and our cash flow was critical. I made the decision to redirect funds from our pension accounts, temporarily. I told myself, to keep us afloat. It was illegal. It was wrong. And it was all my doing. Arthur discovered what I'd done during a routine audit. He confronted me, threatened to go to the authorities. I begged him not to, not for my sake, but for Liam's. He'd just joined the company. Any scandal would destroy his career before it even began. Arthur loved his son more than anything, so he made me an offer. He would take responsibility for the missing funds. He would claim he'd been embezzling for personal use. In exchange, I would ensure Liam's future at the company, would groom him to eventually take over, would protect him from the fallout. I agreed. I let him sacrifice himself, his reputation, his entire life. I told myself it was for Liam, for the company, for the hundreds of employees who depended on us. But really, it was cowardice. Arthur went to prison for crimes I committed. He lost his license, his career, his family, and I said nothing. I built my empire on his silence." Dr. Shaw paused, took a sip of water from the glass at her elbow. Liam sat frozen, his hands gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. The other people in the room weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at him. "I'm not seeking absolution," Dr. Shaw continued reading. "There is none for what I've done, but the truth deserves to be known. Arthur Sterling is innocent of the charges brought against him. He is innocent of everything except loving his son too much. This will is my confession and my penance." Dr. Shaw set down the first page and picked up the next. "Now for the specific bequests. To my executive team at Ether Capital, David Chen, Susan Martinez, and Robert Liu, I leave a collective bonus of $5 million to be divided equally in recognition of your years of service and loyalty. She continued down the list. Generous gifts to charities, scholarship funds in Alara's parents' names, the company penthouse to David Chen, who'd apparently been Alara's second-in-command for years. Then to my son, Liam Frederick Sterling. Liam straightened slightly, his eyes fixed on Dr. Shaw's face. Liam, you are my greatest achievement and my greatest failure. I gave you every opportunity, every advantage, every chance to succeed. But I also taught you to value success over integrity, appearances over truth. I hope someday you can forgive me for that. I leave you the sum of $25, $1 for each year you've worked at Ether Capital, with the following message: money you didn't earn corrupts. Leadership you haven't learned destroys. Start again as your father once did, and maybe you'll become the person you were meant to be. The silence that followed was absolute. Liam's face had moved through several shades of white to something approaching gray. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. The remainder of my estate, Dr. Shaw read, her voice steady and clear, including all shares of Ether Capital, all properties, all investment accounts, all intellectual property rights, and all other assets totaling approximately $185 million. I leave to my former husband, Arthur Sterling, the only truly honest man I ever knew. The room erupted. Not loudly, we were professionals, after all, and even shock was polite, but erupted nonetheless. Murmurs, exclamations, the scraping of chairs as people turned to look at me. I sat very still, my hands still folded on the table, and felt nothing, or perhaps I felt too much, and it all canceled out to numbness. There's more, Dr. Shaw said, raising her voice slightly. The room quieted again. Mrs. Sterling left specific instructions. Mr. Sterling, this is addressed directly to you. She withdrew a smaller envelope from her portfolio, cream-colored and sealed with wax. She slid it across the table to me. My name was written on the front in Alara's distinctive handwriting, all precise angles and strong lines. She asked that you read this privately, Dr. Shaw said, but the rest pertains to the estate management, which I should explain now. She went on talking about trusts and tax implications and transfer procedures, but I wasn't listening anymore. I was staring at the envelope, at Alara's handwriting, at the ghost of her hand moving across the paper. When had she written this? How long had she carried these words around, waiting for the right time to speak them? Liam stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the floor. This is insane. She wasn't in her right mind. I'll contest this. Mrs. Sterling was thoroughly evaluated by 3 separate physicians in the months before her death, Dr. Shaw said calmly. All certified that she was of sound mind and body when she executed this will. She anticipated challenges and took appropriate precautions. The will is ironclad. He stole from us. Liam's voice had risen, lost its professional polish. He pointed at me, his hand shaking. He admitted it. He went to prison. He took a plea deal to protect you, Dr. Shaw said quietly, as your mother just explained. No, Liam shook his head, his hair coming loose from its neat style. No, that's not. He wouldn't. He looked at me then, really looked at me for the first time since I'd entered the room. I saw him taking in my outdated suit, my worn shoes, my lined face, and gray hair. Saw him trying to reconcile this image with whatever he'd built up in his mind over the years. The criminal father, the betrayer, the selfish man who destroyed everything for money. Did you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper, edged with a terrifying blend of anger and confusion. Did you really take the fall for her? I met his eyes, Ilara's eyes, the same deep green, and nodded once. Yes. But why? Why would you do that? Because you were my son, I said simply, the forgiveness for his years of betrayal already forming in my chest. And I loved you. The past tense hung between us like an accusation. The boy I'd pushed on swings and helped with homework and taught to ride a bike. But that boy was gone. This man standing before me, trembling with rage and confusion, was a stranger. Liam's face crumpled. For just a moment, I saw the boy, uncertain, vulnerable, scared. Then he turned and walked out of the conference room, his expensive shoes clicking rapidly against the marble floor. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The other executives began gathering their things, murmuring excuses and condolences. Within minutes, the room had emptied, except for Dr. Shaw and me. That was more dramatic than most will readings, she said, allowing herself a small smile. Though not perhaps more dramatic than Mrs. Sterling intended. She always did have a flair for timing. She loved you, you know, Dr. Shaw said, her smile gone. But even after everything, maybe especially after everything, Dr. Shaw snapped her portfolio closed. I'll leave you to read her letter in private. Take your time. The room is reserved for another hour. After she left, I sat alone in the glass and chrome room, watching the sun set over Chicago, the city I'd once called home, the city where I'd had a career, a family, a life, all gone now, scattered like ashes on the wind. I picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it in my hands. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to hear Ilara's voice again, even through written words, didn't want to feel anything at all, but I broke the seal anyway. The letter was written in the same precise handwriting as the envelope, dated 3 months before her death. Dear Arthur, if you're reading this, then I'm finally free of the cowardice that defined my life. I wish I could say this brings me comfort, but the dead have no comfort, only silence. This letter is not an apology. Words cannot undo what I've done to you. Consider it instead a confession, a testimony, a final accounting. I want you to know that I discovered I was dying 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months. I've stretched it to 14 through sheer stubbornness and the best medical care money can buy. But even money has limits, and I'm at mine now. When I received the diagnosis, my first thought was relief. Not for myself. Dying is terrifying. Arthur, no matter how much you've lived, but relief that finally I would have an excuse to tell the truth. What was the company compared to death? What was reputation compared to meeting whatever comes next with a clean conscience? But even then, I hesitated. I told myself I needed to arrange things properly, needed to ensure Liam would be protected, needed to structure the company's succession. Lies. All of them. The truth is, I was still a coward, even facing death. It was Liam himself who finally pushed me to act. 3 months ago, he came to me with plans to expand Ether Capital into advanced AI development. He was so excited, so proud. He showed me his business plan, his projections, his strategy. It was brilliant work. He's always been brilliant. But there was something missing. Some core of integrity that should have been there. What if the technology gets misused? I asked him, what if it harms people? That's not our problem, he said. We're not responsible for how people use our products. And I realized I'd taught him that. I'd taught him that success justifies any cost, that business is immoral, that you do what you have to do to win. I'd taught him these things by example. By staying silent about what I'd done, by letting you take the blame, I made you into his cautionary tale, the weak man who stole because he wasn't strong enough to succeed legitimately, and he learned the lesson I'd intended. Be strong, be ruthless, Never let sentiment get in the way of winning. I created a monster. Arthur, not Liam. He's still capable of being the person he should have been. But the version of him I shaped, molded, trained to follow in my footsteps, that version is a monster. And it's my fault. So this will is not generosity. It's penance. It's strategy. It's my last attempt to be the mother Liam deserved. Even if he'll hate me for it. The money I'm leaving you, I know you don't want it. I know you'll probably give most of it away. That's fine. That's expected. But I'm also leaving you Ether Capital. And there I'm asking something of you. Don't let the company die. Don't sell it off in pieces or shut it down. It employs 3,000 people. It provides health care, pensions, opportunities. Those people are innocent of my crimes and yours. They deserve better than to be casualties of our war with ourselves. But also, don't let Liam have it. Not yet. Not until he's earned it. Not until he understands what leadership actually means. Run it if you can. Hire someone to run it if you can't. Structure it however you need to. But please, Arthur, make it something worth inheriting. Make it a place where integrity matters, where people matter, where success is measured by more than profit margins. Make it what it should have been from the beginning. If Liam ever becomes the person he should be, the person I should have raised him to be, then give it to him. But only then. That's all I ask. I've also included documentation of my crimes, original bank statements, emails, memos, everything proving what I did. Give it to the authorities if you want. Clear your name officially. You've earned that right. Or keep it private and let the truth exist in the will. That's your choice. I don't know if there's an afterlife. Arthur, I don't know if I'll be judged for what I've done. But if there is, and if I am, I hope whoever is doing the judging takes into account that I loved our son. I loved him so much I was willing to destroy a good man to protect him. That love was selfish. That love was cowardice. That love caused irreparable harm. But it was love. I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate. I know. Sorry can't give you back 15 years. Sorry can't restore your reputation. Sorry can't rebuild your relationship with Liam. Sorry is just a word. But it's all I have left to give you, along with money you don't want and a company you never asked for. Use them better than I did. Ilara. I read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. My hands weren't shaking. My eyes weren't wet. I felt strangely calm, like I'd finally reached the end of a very long journey and found nothing there but air. Ilara was dead. The truth was out. Liam knew what I'd done, what his mother had done, and I was suddenly, absurdly, impossibly wealthy. None of it felt real. I stood up, picked up the envelope, and walked to the window. The sun had fully set now, and Chicago's lights were beginning to shine like stars scattered across the ground. Somewhere in this city was the boy I'd once pushed on swings, the son I'd gone to prison for, the stranger who'd walked out of this room an hour ago with his whole world shattered. I should have felt triumph, should have felt vindicated, should have felt something other than this vast, empty tiredness. But all I felt was tired, and a deep-seated anger that Ilara had waited until she was dead to grant me this hollow forgiveness. The next week passed in a blur of paperwork and lawyers and accountants. Dr. Shaw was efficient. Within 5 days, I had access to accounts containing more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Within 7 days, I had a majority stake in Ether Capital and a board meeting scheduled to introduce myself as the new owner. Liam didn't contact me. I didn't contact him. We orbited each other like binary stars. Too much history to collide. Too much gravity to escape. On Thursday, I met with the executive team at Ether Capital. They were polite, professional, and clearly terrified. The disgraced ex-CFO had just become their boss. The man who'd supposedly embezzled from the company now owned it. Never mind that Alara's will had cleared my name. People believed what they wanted to believe, and they wanted to believe the narrative they'd been told 15 years ago. I'm not here to run this company. I told them in the conference room that had once been Alara's domain. I don't have the skills or the desire, but I am here to ensure it runs ethically. Dr. Shaw will be implementing oversight procedures, independent audits every quarter, ethics training for all executives, a whistleblower protection system that reports directly to the board, which I'll be chairing. David Chen, Ilara's former second-in-command, cleared his throat. And what about day-to-day operations? Who will be CEO? You will, I said. Interim CEO. Pending board approval. You've been doing the job in everything but name for the past 5 years. Make it official. Relief flickered across his face. And Liam? What about him? He's been vocal about contesting the will. He's been trying to get board support to challenge your ownership. I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. Let him try. The will is solid, and Liam needs to learn something his mother never taught him. What's that? That some battles aren't worth winning. After the meeting, I walked through the building. My building now, though I could barely process that fact. Employees whispered as I passed. Some looked curious, some looked resentful, none looked particularly happy to see me. I found myself on the top floor in what had been Alara's office. It had been cleared out. No personal effects, no photos, no trace of her presence except the faint scent of her perfume that still clung to the curtains. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I stood where Alara must have stood thousands of times, looking out at her kingdom. Had she ever regretted what she'd done? Or had she convinced herself it was justified, necessary? The cost of success? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Can we talk? L? I stared at it for a long time. 2 words and an initial. My son reaching out after 15 years of silence, asking for something he'd never had to ask for before. My time, my attention, my willingness to hear him. I could ignore it, could let him stew in his own confusion and anger, could make him feel a fraction of what I'd felt, sitting in that prison cell, knowing my son thought I was a criminal. But revenge had never been my style. And besides, I was tired of carrying anger, tired of carrying anything. I typed back. Saturday, 10, 00 a.m. The Coffee Bean on Michigan Avenue. His response came immediately. I'll be there. Saturday arrived cold and bright. One of those autumn days where the sun shines but provides no warmth. I arrived at the cafe early, ordered a black coffee, and took a seat by the window. The place was busy with weekend crowds, students with laptops, couples sharing pastries, families trying to contain energetic children. Liam arrived exactly at 10, while 0, punctual as always. He looked different, smaller, somehow, less polished. His hair was slightly disheveled, and he wore dark jeans and a sweater instead of his usual power suits. He spotted me, hesitated, then walked over with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield. Hi, he said. Hi, can I sit? I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat, ordered a latte from the passing server, then folded his hands on the table in a gesture that reminded me painfully of myself. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. I tried to find traces of the little boy I'd known in this man's face. He was there, hidden under layers of time and experience and hurt, but he was there. I don't know where to start, Liam said finally. The beginning usually works. He smiled slightly at that, a ghost of the easy humor we'd once shared. Which beginning? There seem to be several versions, and I don't know which one is true anymore. The true one, I said. That's always the best place to start. He took a breath. I remember you as the best dad in the world. You came to all my baseball games. You helped me build that trading simulator for the high school fair. You taught me to drive and told me it was okay to be scared, but I should try anyway. You made me feel like I could do anything. You could. You did. Then suddenly, you were a criminal. Mom said you'd been stealing from the company for years. She said you'd betrayed us, betrayed everyone. She showed me the bank statements, the transfers, the evidence. She said you'd confessed. I didn't want to believe it, but there was proof. Your confession, your guilty plea, prison. I remember. I was so angry, so confused. How could you throw away everything for money? We had money. We had success. What more did you need? I thought. He stopped, swallowed hard. I thought you'd loved money more than you loved us. The server brought his latte. He wrapped his hands around it, but didn't drink. Then, Mom died. He continued. And that will, that letter, and suddenly, everything I thought I knew was a lie. You didn't steal anything. You sacrificed everything for me to protect my career, my future, and I've spent 15 years hating you for it. You didn't know, I said quietly. Your mother made sure you didn't know. But I should have questioned it, should have wondered, should have. His voice cracked. You were my father. I should have believed in you. You were 30. Your mother was your hero, your boss, your mentor. She told you I was guilty, showed you proof. What else could you have believed? The truth? He looked up at me, eyes bright with tears. I should have believed the truth. The truth was hidden. Your mother made sure of that. I hate her for it. The words came out fierce, fueled by pure anger. I hate that she lied to me. I hate that she let you suffer. I hate that she built her empire on your sacrifice and never told me. I hate that she's dead so I can't scream at her. She was dying when she wrote that will, I said. She had months to reconsider, to change it, to keep her secrets. She chose to tell the truth. That took courage. Too little. Too late. Perhaps. But it's more than many people manage. Liam wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, a gesture so young it hurt to watch. I've been trying to contest the will. Did you know that? David mentioned it. I hired 3 different lawyers. They all told me the same thing. It's airtight. Mom made sure of that. So, I can't even fight it. Can't even pretend I have a leg to stand on. I'm just done. The partner job I worked 15 years for. Gone. The inheritance I expected. Gone. The mother I thought I knew never existed. The father I hated for years. Innocent. My whole life built on lies. He laughed, but it came out bitter. 25. That's what I'm worth. $1 for each year I worked at a company my mother built on fraud and my father's sacrifice. It's almost poetic. She wanted you to start over, I said. To learn what it means to earn something rather than inherit it. Maybe, or maybe she wanted to save you. Liam looked at me then, really looked, his expression raw and searching. What do you want? Dad? You have the money, the company, everything. You could destroy me completely. You could make sure I never work in finance again. You could tell everyone what Mom did, what I didn't know. You could. I don't want revenge, Liam. The simple statement was the first true act of forgiveness toward him. Then what? What do you want? It was a good question. What did I want? For 15 years, I'd wanted nothing, had trained myself to want nothing, had learned to live small, need little, expect less, and now I had everything, and I still didn't know what I wanted. I want you to be okay, I said finally. I want you to learn what your mother never did, that integrity matters more than success, that who you are matters more than what you own, that some prices are too high, no matter what you're buying. How am I supposed to do that? I'm 45 years old. I don't know how to be anyone except who Mom made me. Then learn. Start over, I urged. Find out who Liam Sterling is when he's not Ilara Sterling's son or Arthur Sterling's victim or Ether Capital partner. Just Liam. Just you. I don't know how. I didn't either, I said. 15 years ago, I was a convicted felon with no job, no money, no prospects. I had to figure out how to be human again from scratch. It wasn't easy. Some days it wasn't even possible, but I did it. How? By accepting that the old life was gone, that I couldn't get it back and shouldn't want to, by finding value in small things. Mr. Sato's gratitude when I saved him $40 on his taxes, the Rodriguez's invitation to their daughter's quinceañera, young Felix texting me a photo when he graduated from college. Small things, honest things, real things. Liam was crying now, not trying to hide it. I don't know if I can do that. You can. You're stronger than you think. I'm really not. You came here today, I pointed out. Gee, that took strength. He smiled through his tears. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass on the street outside. A young couple holding hands. An old man feeding pigeons despite the "Do Not Feed" sign. A child chasing a balloon that had escaped her grip. What will you do with the company? Liam asked eventually. Keep it running. Make it ethical. Try to turn it into something worth inheriting. And then what? Give it back to me? Maybe. If you earn it. If you become someone who could run it with integrity instead of just ambition. He nodded slowly. That's fair. Your mother left you $25, I said. But I'm offering you a job. Entry-level administrative assistant in the ethics compliance department. Minimum wage? No special treatment? No fast track to management? Just work. Liam's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? If you want it. If you're willing to start at the bottom and earn your way up. If you can handle taking orders from people who used to report to you. If you can learn to value the work more than the title. That's humiliating. Yes. Everyone will know. Everyone will laugh. Probably. Why would you do that to me? I'm not doing it to you. I'm offering you a chance to do it for yourself. Your mother's will took away the life you thought you'd have. This is an opportunity to build a better one. But only if you want it. I won't force you. I won't pressure you. The offer stands open-ended. Take it or don't. He looked at his latte, at the foam swirling in patterns on the surface. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. He stood up, gathered his coat and purse, then paused. Dad. Yes. I'm sorry for not believing in you, for the years we lost, for everything. I stood too, faced him across the small cafe table. I'm sorry, too, for the burden you've carried, for the lies you were told, for not being there to help you become who you should have been. Can we? He hesitated. Can we try again? Not pick up where we left off? That's impossible. But start fresh. Learn who we are now? I thought about that. About whether forgiveness was possible. Whether trust could be rebuilt. Whether 15 years of silence could be bridged by intention and effort. We can try, I said. He smiled. A real smile this time. Small but genuine. That's enough. Trying is enough. He left then, disappearing into the Saturday crowd. I sat back down, finished my coffee, and watched the city move around me. Chicago, the place I'd fled from, afraid to face what I'd lost. The place I'd returned to, and found that loss transformed into something strange and unexpected. I thought about Ilara's letter folded in my wallet, about her confession and her penance, and her hope that I'd use her money better than she had, about the company she'd built on fraud and sacrifice, now mine to reshape or destroy. I thought about Liam walking through the streets of Chicago, trying to figure out who he was when everything he'd believed turned out to be false, about the job offer I'd made, the opportunity to become someone new. And I thought about myself, Arthur Sterling, age 65, former CFO, convicted felon, tax preparer for small businesses, and now absurdly, impossibly owner of a $185 million empire. What would I do with it? The answer came slowly, like dawn breaking. I would do what Alara had asked. Keep the company running. Make it ethical. Turn it into something worth inheriting. But I would also do more than that. I would use the money to create second chances, scholarships for people with criminal records, job training for those re-entering society after prison, rehabilitation programs, legal aid for those who couldn't afford defense attorneys. All the things I'd wished existed 15 years ago when I'd been released from prison with nothing but a record and a reputation. I would turn Ether Capital into a proving ground for Liam. Not a gift, but an opportunity. A place where he could learn to lead with integrity if he chose to. A place where he could earn what had been taken from him if he was willing to work for it. And I would keep my apartment in Portland, my simple life, my small accounting practice. Because those things were real in a way wealth never could be. They were earned, chosen, lived. They were mine in a way inherited money never would be. The check I'd write Liam for his first paycheck would be worth more than any inheritance. It would be the first dollar he'd ever truly earned, free from his mother's shadow and his father's sacrifice. And maybe eventually he'd understand that. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd reject the job, reject the opportunity, reject the chance to start over. That would hurt, but it would be his choice, his life to live, his mistakes to make, his path to walk. I couldn't save him from himself any more than Alara could save me from my choices, or I could save Alara from hers. We all have to walk our own roads, make our own decisions, live with our own consequences. But I could offer him a map, a starting point, a first step. The rest would be up to him. I stood up, left money on the table for the coffee and a generous tip, and walked out into the autumn sunshine. The air was cold but clean, sharp against my face. Chicago smelled like car exhaust and roasting chestnuts and possibility. I had a flight back to Portland that evening. Mr. Sato needed his taxes finished. The Rodriguezes wanted advice on incorporating their business. Young Felix was thinking about buying a car and wanted help understanding the loan terms. Small things, honest things, real things. But first, I had one more stop to make. Graceland Cemetery was quiet on Saturday afternoon. Just the wind and the distant traffic and the soft sound of my footsteps on the path. I found Alara's grave easily. Fresh dirt, fresh flowers, a simple granite headstone with her name and dates, and the inscription. She built empires, but forgot to build herself. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, looking at that stone. So many things I could have said, so many accusations, regrets, what-ifs, but they all seemed small and pointless now, spoken to someone who could no longer hear them. I'll take care of the company, I said finally, my voice quiet in the empty cemetery. And I'll take care of Liam if he'll let me. That's all I can promise. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and distant rain. I waited as if Alara might answer, as if the universe might give me some sign that I was doing the right thing. But there was only silence, and maybe that was answer enough. I turned and walked back toward the cemetery gates, toward the cab that would take me to the airport, toward the simple apartment in Portland, where my life waited, small and honest and real. Behind me, Alara's grave stood silent in the autumn sun, holding secrets that no longer mattered, truths that had finally been told, and a legacy that I would spend the rest of my life trying to redeem. Not for her, not even for Liam, but for myself. Because at the end of everything, after the betrayal and the sacrifice, after the prison and the silence, after the money and the revelation, what mattered wasn't what you owned, or what you'd lost, or who had wronged you. What mattered was who you chose to be when all the lies fell away, and you stood alone with nothing but your own conscience and the choice of what to do next. I chose integrity. I chose second chances. I chose to believe that people could change, that Liam could become someone Alara never was, that I could use wealth to create more than Alara ever had. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I was foolish. Maybe 15 years of living small had made me soft, unable to understand the cutthroat world I was stepping back into. But I'd spent 15 years learning to be human again, learning to find value in simplicity, meaning in honesty, peace in letting go of anger. I wasn't going to forget those lessons now. The taxi driver asked where I was going. I gave him the address of the airport, then settled back in the seat and watched Chicago disappear behind me. The glass towers, the traffic, the busy streets where people hurried past each other without looking up. My phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "I've been thinking about that job offer. Can I have the weekend to decide?" I typed back, "Take as long as you need. The offer doesn't expire." 3 dots appeared showing he was typing. They disappeared, appeared again, disappeared. Finally, a message came through. "Thank you for everything, for the sacrifice, for the chance, for being willing to try. I don't deserve any of it. None of us deserve anything," I replied. "We just get what we get and try to do something worthwhile with it." The dots appeared one more time. "Then I'll call you Monday. You'll answer?" I put my phone away and watched the suburbs give way to farmland, then the sprawl around the airport. In a few hours, I'd be back in Portland, back in my small apartment with the rain on the windows and the radiator creaking, back to Mr. Sato's taxes and the Rodriguez's business questions and young Felix's car loan concerns. Back to my real life, but now that life came with an addition, a $185 million responsibility, a company to reshape, and a son to help rebuild. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when Dr. Evelyn Shaw called me about Alara's death. It wasn't the ending I'd have chosen, if anyone had asked. But it was mine, my story, my choice, and maybe that was enough. The plane took off into a sky turning pink and gold with sunset, carrying me west toward home and forward toward whatever came next. Below, Chicago shrank to toy size, then to nothing, just another city among many, holding its secrets and its stories and the lives of millions of people trying to figure out who they were and what they wanted and whether forgiveness was possible after everything fell apart. I hoped it was, for Liam's sake, for mine, for all of us carrying the weight of our mistakes and our regrets and our choices. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in 15 years of exile and sacrifice and starting over, it was this: the story isn't finished until you stop trying, until you give up, until you let the mistakes and the betrayals and the losses define you instead of refine you. Alara's story was finished, but mine was still being written, and Liam's, and everyone's who still had breath and choice and the courage to try one more time. That was the real inheritance Alara had left. Not the money or the company, but the reminder that it's never too late to tell the truth, never too late to make amends, never too late to become who you should have been all along, even if it takes dying to find the courage, even if it takes losing everything to understand what matters, even if it takes 15 years and a $185 million confession to finally make things right. The plane climbed higher, chasing the sun toward the mountains and the ocean and the small apartment, where my simple, honest life waited for me to return and figure out how to reconcile who I'd been with, who I'd become with, who I'd now have to be. It wouldn't be easy, but then again, the worthwhile things never are. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.